I thought it was a rather sedate start. What did you make initially of Liz Truss's first performance at that dispatch box, going toe-to-toe with Keir Starmer?
Yeah, I think it was pretty sedate, pretty dull compared to some of the PMQs we've seen in the past. Clearly, whenever you think about Liz Truss, she doesn't quite have the same force of personality that her predecessor Boris Johnson had. But then, maybe in the end, Patrick, actually what people want to see is a bit of seriousness at what is clearly quite a difficult time for the country. I thought on the overall, though, it was pretty assured, pretty confident performance from Liz Truss, the new Prime Minister. Now, in many regards, that probably shouldn't come as a surprise. She had been the longest-serving Cabinet Minister to date in the Conservative reign since 2010, so she's very used to standing at that dispatch box. But clearly PMQs is a whole different ballpark to ministerial questions, and I think she provided pretty straight answers actually on the whole to straight questions. She was quite pithy, quite effective at times in her response, but overall what you really got was a real big policy divide, clearly, didn't you, between Keir Starmer and Liz Truss on this idea of taxation and corporation tax, on that idea of a windfall tax to try and help pay for this energy price cap freeze that we're going to see announced tomorrow. Labour clearly feel that they've got public opinion on their side when it comes to who's going to pay for it, whether it should be those big corporations making excessive profits or whether it should be done through either borrowing or higher bills for the next couple of decades. But Liz Truss was pretty combative in saying that, no, I'm ideological about this, raising taxes is not a Conservative thing to do, and that is not what I plan to do. Though there is a note in the sense that the already windfall tax that was added and announced by Rishi Sunak back in the spring, that will remain in place. It's not going to get scrapped. Also, in the last couple of minutes, Patrick, we are getting more details because Liz Truss is back in Downing Street behind me of the continuing ministerial appointments beyond the Cabinet. Robert Jenrick, who was a Cabinet Minister, has just been announced as a Health Minister. He's interesting, not least of all because he was in the Cabinet, but also he supported Rishi Sunak in the campaign. There's not many, as you can see, of the faces on your screens right now. Many of them supported supported Rishi Sunak during the campaign. Very much the cabinet is full of loyalists. But in the junior ministerial appointments, it seems that some of them are Sunak supporters. Other people being announced are Victoria Prentice, who is going to the Department for Work and Pensions, Michael Tomlinson, who's becoming Solicitor General, Rachel McLean, who's a Minister of Justice, and Julia Lopez at the DCMS as a junior minister. This, what we're looking at now, are pictures of the first cabinet meeting that took place of Liz Truss government a little earlier on today.
Yes, indeed, Darren. Actually, there's not a lot of room around that cabinet table, is there, to be fair? I thought it was interesting. You mentioned a really good point there about the dividing line, and Liz Truss, so far anyway, standing firm on her economic ideology, which is quite nice. I think a lot of people have been calling for potentially a little bit more ideological leadership in the past. But just in relation as well to what was talked about, what was discussed in those cabinet meetings earlier, in that cabinet meeting, I should say, there's some rumblings about this British Bill of Rights, Darren, in our relationship going forward with the ECHR. Can you fill us in with a little bit more detail on that, please, if you've got it?
Yeah, it looks like at the moment it's all been put on hold. So the European Court of Human Rights clearly is a court of appeal that many people turn to when they feel that they've got a case that's not being settled in their favour here in the UK. Many feel, though, that it is somewhat abused, maybe, to actually to stifle British government's pieces of legislation and law that are in place, most notably, let's say, for example, Patrick, with the Rwanda policy when it comes to migration recently. So the idea of the Boris Johnson administration under Dominic Raab, who was the Justice Secretary, was to introduce a British Bill of Rights to, in some ways, try and circumnavigate some of that and to try and assert not just the sovereignty of Parliament, but indeed of our Supreme Court here in the UK. However, it looks like the attempts to introduce that British Bill of Rights, which was due to have its second reading in Parliament next week, have somewhat been abandoned. According to the Sun newspaper today, they're reporting the government insiders are saying the bill is a mess and it's not going to come back in anything like its current form, and that, frankly, it is looking all, as I say, like a bit of a mess. And there are even people suggesting that it may well now be dumped all together. Clearly, this is not good for the government because Liz Truss has talked about wanting, to pursue that Rwanda policy, and among other things about trying to take back control of the laws in this country. It'll be interesting to see whether the new Justice Secretary, Brandon Lewis, in some ways can come up with a better form of this that is legally tight, that can get through Parliament. But for the time being, it is a mess that's very much now on hold.